war had not been going all that well for our Army of the Potomac by this summer, 1863. We had gotten soundly thrashed at Fredericksburg and at Chancellorsville in Virginia, even though we knocked down plenty of Rebs. The veterans no longer had the jitters about fighting Lee, and as we chased him north into Maryland and Pennsylvania, greeted as heroes by loyal families, our chins rose higher and our step increased.
We marched into Pennsylvania with the pride of Julius Caesar's legions, unstoppable. The world's greatest army led by the world's greatest general, Robert E. Lee. Most of the hard farming men had never left their counties prior to the war when entering Pennsylvania in June, and were quite amazed at the farms and holdings of the Northerners. The men were under orders from the general to be courteous and compensate for all forage. This order was obeyed somewhat and led to almost comical incidents between our men and the citizenry.
Howdy, ma'am. Any pies or treats to be wishing to sell?
Not for you.
Or any of your fellow wolves. What'd she call us?
No, my sisters were incorrect. You just smell like wolves. You look like goats. That's so.
No,
Wait!
get
What do you
out!
think you're doing?
Please!
Oh, wait, the exchange. General Lee wishes us to be correct.
The Yankees soon sniffed us out, but we were eager for a fight.
We were now the defenders of our homes and needed only to get at the Army of Northern Virginia. The first attacks at Gettysburg, where our troops of Heath's division had just passed dawn. Archer's Tennesseans taking the brunt of the initial advance. They deployed skirmishers and lines of battle and went at the Army of the Potomac's cavalry under Buford.
cannons roared, carbines cracked, and musket volleys rolled. The Yankee cavalry did their job retreating slowly and inflicting casualties. By mid-morning, Yankee infantry appeared on the field, and now a regular fight ensued. No one knew the extent to which this action inaugurated.
If you're running out of ammunition, find some from a wounded comrade!
The First Corps arrived on the field and routed the Rebs in detail. The old 56th Pennsylvania claimed to get the first volley into the Graybacks. The old soldiers had a sense that this was just the beginning.
As the day went on, men on both sides threw more lambs into the slaughter. The perfection in killing by this point of the war was ghastly to behold. It was systematic. Every shot seemed to hit its intended target. The defending Yankees, lying behind brows of hills or behind crude works, would have the advantage on this field.
The Iron Brigade, those fine Westerners with their tall army hats, came into the field and captured rebel General Archer. It was with a cost, however. The men lost their beloved General Reynolds, who was shot from his horse, while almost upon Archer's brigade of Johnnies.
The first encounter that morning was as a clash of strapping pugilists, feeling the strength of punch of the other. Our regiment had even gained ground and were about to turn their position, but the Yankees had different ideas and soon had our men trapped and on the run. One regiment, the 26th North Carolina, led by a 21-year-old wildcat, Colonel Burgwyn, led his 800 men as if on parade into the vaulted Black Hat Brigade of Westerners. After fighting at 30 yards, almost 600 of his men were killed or wounded, and the colonel himself mortally stricken. General A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps and General Dick Ewell's 2nd were almost entirely on the field together, and by late in the day pressed forward. The artillery support was deafening, and musketry so loud that I had to shout in each of the men's ears to give commands. We pressed forward, despite the heaps of casualties.
Some of the Iron Brigade, plus the red-legged devils of Brooklyn, captured a railroad cut full of Johnnies. The casualties were heavy, but the first shouts of victory belonged to those of us in blue.
Come on, Johnny, surrender! Lay down your arm!
It seemed that time stood still. Many of the men, remembering the ugly stain of Chancellorsville, committed reckless acts of bravado, much like a rooster stepping up to a bear. One man, a Pennsylvania sergeant named Crippen, one of the Bucktails, stepped out from his regiment and on his own, and with the Johnnies in his face, told them where to go.
I'm not about to turn my back. Come on, follow with you there. Come on!
Crippen's act rallied his men to fight on, but he would join the long list of dead.
Our men outflanked the Yankees in a few places, but my God, they were stubborn. As never before, in my estimation. They bled us. I entered the fight with 40 muskets and 3 officers in my company, and by our last shot had but 20 muskets and my 2nd lieutenant commanding, as I took a spent ball that had my thigh swell up like a melon.
First company, hey! Come on.
We licked the Rebs good for the balance of the day, but by the later afternoon, long gray lines could be seen coming from the north, west, and south. We slugged it out until our officers quit the field. I know I knocked down their rebel red colors once myself. They still came on, and the butchering went on. My own comrades were falling like grain before the scythe. Some men stated that the Germans in the 11th Corps broke, as they did at Chancellorsville. But I would say that is a bold-faced lie. Their long lines of dead looked just as ours. When we retreated upon a cemetery, 2nd Corps Commander General Hancock and 11th Corps Commander General Howard were there restoring order, placing guns, organizing troops, and there was confidence gained from that. We were forced to leave the field, sometimes officers having to grab the colors from the bearers themselves.
The colonel's surrendering the regiment. He doesn't want the Rebs to get the colors.
In one case, with 16th Maine cut off, instead of having to surrender their colors, tore them to pieces, sharing with every man in the regiment. They took those pieces with them to Southern prison pens.
We chased Yankees through the town and captured hundreds. When the first day was drawing to a close, many officers, especially old colonels, could be heard arguing about pressing the attack, finishing it off, and of that kind. Some would caveat their commentary with, Jackson would have kept advancing. But Jackson was not here, but Ewell and Hill in his place. They stopped all advances. As we bivouacked amongst the yards of towns, we could hear the sounds of Federal artillery rolling into position, the accompanying sounds of axes felling trees and staff officers directing regiments into position. Every line officer realized we'd missed our opportunity. The Yankees were staying, and on well-chosen ground. With this, The hundreds of scattered field hospitals filled quickly, and surgeons worked at sawing bones without rest.
Regardless of all that we could do, the Rebs again drove us and held the field.
After, many of our regiment went to bury their brothers, cousins, and friends. I got some sleep that first night, and the whole of the army seemed to march past my makeshift bed. Lee was seen pointing and gesturing, staff officers galloping off on their errands. Ewell's men occupied the left of the army, Hill's the center, and General Longstreet's First Corps was coming up from the rear. By rights, they would lead off the day's attack and were supposed to, but through inexcusable bungling, could not step off in position until nearly 5 p.m.
I managed to sleep some hours that night, but woke up to the sound of men of our regiment finding us in the dark. July 2nd was upon us, and it seemed as if the whole army was up. The prickly points of musket stacks could be seen for a mile in any direction. We had 9 men left from my company, from the 22 which started. My army blouse had 5 bullet holes in it, but my body had only those that God intended. What was old Meade going to do?
When they did step off, though, the Yankees in their front, again on chosen ground, bled Longstreet's men. Hood's division, especially his famed Texans, ran into Spartan defense by Yankees holding some small hills and mountains on our right. Longstreet attacked with sledgehammer blows, much like his gallant work of 2nd Manassas, but unlike there, the Yankees fought longer and harder and even counterattacked. But our regiment took ground, especially those fine Mississippians of Barksdale, who, despite being pounded by Yankee artillery all the while, captured a Yankee general named Graham, took a few batteries and hundreds of prisoners. The 21st Mississippi, under Colonel Humphreys, was reported to even breach the Federal lines before having to retreat without support. Their charge, someone related, was called the greatest charge ever witnessed in the war.
The 12th Corps was up on Culp's Hill on the right, the beaten-up 1st and 11th Corps the center, and the 3rd and 5th Corps coming up on the left. Some of the fighting done by General Sickles' 3rd Corps men in the Devil's Den, a wheatfield, and a peach orchard were the talk of the survivors. Some of our regiments, despite being outnumbered 2-1, counterattacked. One of those regiments, the 124th New York, led by a Colonel Ellis, had their officers mounted and launched a bayonet attack at the famed Texans of Hood.
Bring up my horses!
Get up! There's plenty up to shoot at, boys! Go ahead and put it into them! Aim it down! Get up there! Shoot! Down here!
Captain Sullivan! Sir. Orange County's fighting like tigers today!
Indeed they are, sir! But why the amount of you and the Baker against our targets to rest?
My dear Sullivan, the men must see us today!
I understand, sir! What are your orders?
Those men of Orange County had salt enough for the entire army. The officers announced to their company commanders that the men must see us today.
Your command, sir.
Advance the colors! We are going to prepare for an advance!
Very good, sir.
Battalion, cease fire! Fix bayonet!
Johnny Reb pushed, our northern men pushed back just as hard. The men did see their officers in the front, and they were knocked down like so much wheat. Sickles' men, like ours on the first day, sold out dearly, as did the troops of the 5th Corps at their side. And when the Hancock's 2nd Corps went to assist them, the killing was unmatched. one tomcat of a boy, Colonel Jeffords of the 4th Michigan reclaimed his colors in the face of 7 bayonets, rescuing that proud banner for the women who gave it to him. His last words, I am told, were of his mother.
Colonel! Grab the gun up behind us on the right. See there? Stay calm, man. Right wing! Change front to the rear! Run the colors! Double quick!
Reserves and the regulars, and then the Irish Brigade and 1st Minnesota attempted to hold back the Rebs. But it was not until the arrival of General Sedgwick and his 6th Corps that the Graybacks pulled back. They marched 37 miles that day and pitched in. That was real soldiering. As the sun was all but down, our men were ordered to the gates of the cemetery on a hill at the south of the town. Some Louisiana troops breaking through on the very spot we met Hancock the night before. The lines nearly broke several times, but as our lines were close and supportive, and the Rebs stretched thinly, they could not maintain the contest. The Battle of July 2nd closed, and that battle was now considered a draw.
Longstreet's late-day attack seemed to have been working. But just as the Federal lines were breaking and collapsing, something happened. A lapse in coordination. Generals having a case of the slows, or simply ill fortune, but something stopped Longstreet that day. And with the futility of General Ewell on the Culp Hill, another day's battle would have to be fought.
right, on Culp's Hill, the 137th New York of Colonel Ireland held back brigades of Rebs, and the men of Greene's brigade, supported by 1st Corps troops, held the woods. I awoke that morning of the 3rd, the same as everyone else, from President Lincoln to my little girl back home in Kingston. What will become of this battle and the nation? We would not have to wait long, as firing came from behind us in the direction of Culp's Hill and the Baltimore Pike. The firing erupted as a pitched battle while it was dark yet. Both sides bumped into each other, and everyone wanted control of the earthworks there.
What's that noise?
I think you're hearing things.
Damn!
Get up! You keep going! Keep going! Watch! Move! Get up! You keep going! Keep going! Watch! Move!
The fighting started on Culp's Hill, and too early. But as the morning went by and the sounds of firing diminished on Ewell's front, word came in that Stuart was in the Union rear, and soon to slice his way into trapping the whole Yankee army.
The soldiers in the center of the line were digging in and collecting muskets from the previous day's fighting. They knew the center would be hit again and were determined to hold it.
As late morning wore through into the afternoon heat, men, especially longtime chums, and many brothers, had time to contemplate what the day would bring. I had the chance to hear a group of several brothers, all officers in the 8th Virginia, Berkeley's, who had one of these kinship meetings.
Looks like they want us to take that ridge yonder.
It's a strong position.
Maybe. Maybe I should let Charles do wagon guard detail.
You can't do that to him.
Edmund, take these. Make sure they get them at home. If I should fall, let them know.
We were going in again. Nearby, I could see friends and family having jovial and appropriate conversation about memories past, wives, mothers. Other men instinctively dug in. Entrenching was becoming all the rage by July 1863.
Brian? Brian,
What?
why are you digging that hole?
Why not? Artillery.
Why don't you make yourself more productive by giving me that canteen full of buttermilk?
I don't have any buttermilk.
Yeah, he does. He got some coffee. He's got some.
Hush up, Joe. I do not.
You better give me that canteen.
Here. Now, hold on now. Don't drink all that.
I think we're going through that field today. Have they ever kept the 11th Mississippi out of an attack? Ever?
No, I suppose you're right.
We took our bayonets and plates and went to work on Mother Earth. Men in our rear used the stone walls and hills for cover. All rested and talked about what was to come.
Hundreds of cannon on both sides shook the ground. It was our guns hitting a concentrated spot in their center, near a woodlot on the ridge, and their guns struck back quickly. We knew it would only last a certain while, and then we would be going in. The guns did slacken, and we formed companies on the colors and aligned. It was then near the 2 o'clock. Heath's division, he being wounded, was commanded by Pettigrew, and effectives formed on the brow of a hill, and we witnessed some of Pickett's men forming to our right. We had support to our rear, a small portion of Pender's division, altogether maybe 10 or 12,000 men. This was the only time in my service I witnessed something as inspiring as what must have been the days of Napoleon's martial prowess. There was a strange hush, as many seemed awed by the grandeur.
The scene of those Rebs advancing down those first rolling hills was breathtaking, grim, and fearsome. Bayonet tips glistened in the sun. The heat increased. Men pulled from their canteens and artillery went to work. Many color bearers of our regiments themselves watched and admired the Johnny Reb flag bearers who bravely held their banners, but would soon be cut to shreds.
Our men went forward with all the martial spirit in the world. That lasted for about 5 minutes until the Federal artillery gained our time and hit us. Men hunched, collectively picked up the pace and rolled forward like veterans. At the right shoulder, arms. Men fell from spherical case, bursting almost on top of our weathered hats, speckled by their brother's blood. It was desperate and perfectly ridiculous by the time we neared the Emmitsburg Road fence.
Reb's advance came through the pike fence and right up to our slight works and artillery. Our guns would fire double canister into them. Often a lingering pink mist would hang in the air. Sometimes portions of bodies hurtled through the ranks. It was bloody work that I could never forget.
Pickett's division, the brigades of Kemper and Garnett, were cut to ribbons. Their support brigade under Armistead actually made steam and pushed through the lines at an angle. Mississippians on our left were decimated by flanking fire by some Ohio troops, and so raced ahead to a white barn.
This attack is played out, sir! Should we make our way back to the lines? That's one hellish field to make our way over a second time! Never come over to the lines!
Sir?
What do we do now, sir? Yank! Yank! We want to, but yours won't let us! Lay on your arms! Lay on your arms!
Some other troops, Tar Heels of the same 26th North Carolina of that boy colonel, raced forward into the jaws of Yankee guns. I was game with my leg, and when encouraging my men across the pike, was struck by a canister round that fractured my hip. While lying there, I was struck upon the crown of my head by a spent Mini. I managed to pull two bodies over me for protection. Remembering the sad story of the Berkeley brothers, it made me think of some ghastly realities. Whole families of men ceased to exist that day.
Get up, man! Get up! Rise up, Virginia! Get up! Come with me!
There was a hand-to-hand fight near my view. A Reb flaunted his rag in the face of Corporal DeCastro of Massachusetts, and the lad, with his guard, went after the Johnny's flag of the 19th Virginia.
Come on! They've all got line! Keep moving! Look at that rebel rag! Right, stay here! What are you doing?
Our men poured in our deadly little lead pills, sometimes having 2 or 3 muskets per man, and yet they still came on. Nearby, portions of graybacks broke through, but found troops ready to pounce upon them. While this last of the assaults took place, I felt a type of pain in my arm, much alike to a hornet's sting, and I realized I'd been shot, and I think it came from our rear by one of our own men's overshot.
It was done. The attack and our army met with absolute catastrophe. Pickett's division and Pettigrew's command was slaughtered. I was taken off the field by a detail of New Jersey soldiers. Must have been close to 1,000 of our men who, unwounded, were taken, and thousands more badly wounded were gently gathered. We all were deposited at hospitals, at the huge Pennsylvania barns that dotted the landscape.
The field was a twisted mass of men and melees. An officer got me to the rear just as the last attacks petered out. As I went past the hills and the army's rear, I could hear an audible "Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg," being called out by our men. It was Fredericksburg in reverse, and the Army of the Potomac and President Lincoln had the victory.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.